All right, good morning, sixth grade. Sorry that this video is late to be uploaded. I was trying to do it last night and I'm not sure if it was Google or what, but I could not get an attachment to successfully load to Classroom, so I'm doing it now. All right, I just want to go over what we have due today. So today's Wednesday, which is going to be your third column. You need to make sure that you have submitted your Achieve Graphic Organizer from yesterday. Um, and you also need, is that the only thing I do? Oh, you had to make sure that you did the 3.3 Open Note quiz. So both of those I'm going to look online later on this afternoon, put the grades in the grade book. I also have listed here, some of you emailed me wanting to do a retake. I'm fine with retakes. If you want to do a retake, I put the Achieve retake policy here. I also put it in Classroom. So all you do is you do the retake and then you take a screenshot of the score, as well as I want to be able to see the title of the article at the top too. Take a screenshot of that, send it to me along with whatever article you want to have replaced, and then just email me that and I'll be able to update your grade. So that is fine. All right, so today what are we going to do? We're going to watch my lecture right now on section 3.4, and it's going to be quick. It shouldn't be that long. And then you're going to read, highlight, and annotate 3.4 in the book. I'm going to upload the pictures for 3.4 to Classroom, so you'll have those. Make sure that you have whatever I have highlighted. That doesn't mean that you just go through and highlight. I actually want you to read it and then highlight. Make sure you highlight what I have highlighted. And any of the activities that I've done in my book, I want you to do as well. And then the homework you're going to have for today is a 3.4 question and answer doc. And I believe, let me check your site. Yes, I've already posted that. It's right here. All right, so you're going to go on to that, and each of you has your own copy, and you're going to use your book, and you're going to use this lecture to fill in the answers. Make sure you do it in a different color so I can see your words versus my questions, and then you're going to submit it. Okay, and that's just a way for me to make sure you're actually doing the reading and actually listening to the lecture. Um, but you can do it online. It's something you have to write. All right, so let's get going on this lecture. So we are moving on to sedimentary rocks. All right. So what's the first thing you notice when you look at this picture? Well, I noticed the layering. And not all sedimentary rocks have layering, but that's kind of like a hallmark of sedimentary rocks, is this notion that sedimentary rocks are just layers of sediment that have been compressed together. And so what is sediment? Sediment is going to be any small or solid piece of material, and it can come from rocks, and it can come from other living things like shells and bones, and we'll see that when we get to organic rocks. But it's small bits of material that are eroded away, weathered away, and then they're carried away from their original spot and they're deposited somewhere else. We'll get to that too. And there they build up in layers, and the layer on top of layer on top of layer ultimately makes all of these layers compress, and over time they form rocks. And so it's this layering that really is what makes sedimentary rocks a sedimentary rock. Just like with igneous rock, what made it igneous rock an igneous rock was the fact that it was magma or lava that just cooled and hardened. All right, so what is this process? So there's a four-step process your book goes through in terms of how do sedimentary rocks form. And we're going to go through each of these ones in a little bit of detail, but I like this picture because it kind of summarized it. So first you're going to have weathering and erosion. Remember, weathering and erosion are two different processes. Weathering is the breaking up of rock. Erosion is the carrying away of those broken up pieces from their original location to a new location. And that typically is going to handle, sometimes it happens by wind, but more often than not it's going to happen by some sort of moving water. All right, once it gets, and we'll get to where deposition happens, but deposition is basically just saying you have this material that's being swept up in the wind or up in some moving water, and eventually it comes to a place where that wind or that water isn't moving as much anymore, and the sediment is going to fall out or come out of the wind or the water and land on the ground. That's deposition. And then compaction is going to result from, as you see here, layers and layers and layers of this sediment depositing. and you have the force of gravity acting on these layers all together, and it starts to compress them downwards. And then here, this is another important thing I should have said. So this is the breaking up of rock and carrying away of rock. We also said that it could be sediment, could be little bits and pieces of material that was once living. And so that's over here, right? You have plant and animal material that's dying. And this material too is going to make its way into sedimentary rock. All right, then the last process is cementation, which it doesn't really show cementation here, but we're going to get to that. It's basically just saying you have minerals that are dissolved in water, and this dissolved solution of minerals. Remember, we talked about that in section 1, how minerals can dissolve in water, and when they do, the little chemical bonds that hold the mineral together are broken, and you have free-floating atoms in the liquid. And eventually, those free-floating atoms are going to reconnect, either when the water evaporates or when the water loses enough temperature and gets cool enough that these bonds reform. Because remember, to break those bonds, you need energy, you need heat. So when the water cools, the minerals are going to come out of the solution and harden again, and when they're in between the little bits and pieces of rocks, they're going to act as like a cement, holding those bits and pieces together. All right, so we've kind of talked about each of these, so I'm going to go through them quicker than I would have otherwise. But so weathering again, as a result of the freezing and thawing of water, plant roots, acid, other forces, you have little bits and pieces of rock that break off of the larger chunks of rock that they once were part of. And this is weathering. So weathering is the breaking up of rock. Erosion is going to be the carrying away of these broken little pieces of rock. And like we said before, a lot of times that involves wind or running water. This was one I didn't mention before, ice. When glaciers move, they also can pick up little broken pieces of rock and carry them with the glacier. And eventually when that glacier, or if and when that glacier recedes and starts to melt, those little pieces are deposited. All right, which brings us to deposition. And I have a little video here. I'm hoping it's going to work. I might have to go out of the present. Oh, here you go. So this is showing us, I saw this as a 32-second video, and it's showing the particles in the stream. And as you can see here, I'm going to pause the video. In this part of the stream, this would be considered the river or the stream, you still have water flowing. You still have velocity, right? The water has some kinetic energy, and in that kinetic energy, these particles are able to stay suspended in the water and be carried. Now it hits a bigger body of water, like a lake or an ocean, and suddenly that water stops moving as quickly. It loses that velocity, and so this decreasing velocity of the water movement causes these particles to fall out of the water and land oftentimes at the mouth of where a river comes into a lake or a river comes into an ocean. And you're going to have a lot of deposition going on there. So let's just finish watching this. So this is showing you these fast-moving particles. Once it hits this standing body of water, water no longer has enough energy to suspend the particles in it, and they fall out, and you start to have deposition. So I found that I really liked that little simulation. Sorry. Okay. So this, like I said, often happens at either along the edges of rivers or streams, or at the mouth of a river or a stream where it empties into a lake or an ocean. All right, once you have the layers deposited, then compaction occurs. And compaction is simply just the pressing together of these layers. And this happens over millions of years. So this is not anything that happens quickly. But you have these layers. So here's these layers starting to add up. And you see this was the original layer. Now we have another layer being added, and eventually another layer being added. And as more and more layers are added, right, we have mass on top of mass on top of mass, and the force of gravity is causing all of that mass to push down on each other and compress. All right, that's just compaction. It's just the upper layers combined with the force of gravity that are pressing these layers together. All right, and the last process is cementation. And like we said, we talked about this in section 1. Minerals can dissolve in solution. Mineral, just like when you think about the example in class we used was rock salt or salt in warm water. You put salt in warm water and you stir it up, it appears as though the salt disappears. But it doesn't actually disappear. It's just the sodium and chloride atoms, the bonds that hold them together are broken. And eventually, if you left that glass on the countertop and the water had time to evaporate out of the glass, the rock salt would reform. The sodium and the chloride would come back together and you'd have salt again. All right, so this is cementation. You have the process where you have dissolved minerals in water and they seep into these little cracks and crevices between the layers of cementation, and eventually they come out of the solution and they reform and they harden into mineral again, and now they are cementing the little bits and pieces that were built up in layers, and you get a rock. You get rock formed. So you can think of the process of cementation as kind of like pouring in a substance that's going to cement together the bits and pieces of rock and other matter so that it forms a rock. All right, the three, let me see where I'm at with my time. I only have up to 15 minutes. Ooh, I gotta hustle it. The three types of sedimentary rocks. So you have clastic rocks. You know what? I'm going to actually, let me pause this. I'm going to upload this video and then I'm going to continue on with the second part of this lecture. Sorry, I know it got a little longer, but I wanted to go through what you needed to do today. So I'm going to pause this here. I'm going to pick back up at this slide. We only have a few more slides to go through, but I'm going to post it as a second video. All right, so this will be video 1 and I'll be posting video 2.